Going to start tonight with a workshop on a request to eliminate some on-street parking in a section of Main Street. We will open with Mr. Gatto and Mr. Boulay in their presentation.
I'd like to start by saying thank you for your time this evening.
Pull the mic a little closer. You're on TV, so sometimes they have a hard time.
As you know, the situation we have at our location across from CMMC Hospital has been a nuisance for years, traffic-wise. We've outgrown it probably about 15 years ago, maybe more. So we're looking to move to 420 Main Street. The property on Main Street there's not too much property ever available. So we're kind of in a difficult situation that we've been looking for years for property. So we know the neighborhood has some anxiety over this, and we'd just like a chance to present this and see if there's any way we can come up with a compromise that works out for everybody. For me, my business, the city, and the community in general. So Mike's going to go over the technical part of it, and you have our submissions already, so I don't want to beat a dead horse and reread everything, so I'll let Mike go.
And I don't want to go into a lot of technical detail unless it's you folks have questions or the audience has questions. We can go into that. I think the key is that having done these projects in the past, there's opportunities to address neighborhood concern out here. I think we're willing to do that. We're willing to make sure that there won't be a net loss in parking, and hopefully we can increase the parking in the neighborhood. If we eliminate all the parking on Main Street, it won't be as convenient, but we hope that we'll be able to replace the parking. We hope that we'll be able to work with the neighbors and also with the city staff to get approvals of this project as we move forward, but without some indication from the council that you're willing to look at eliminating possible spaces, it's not necessary, because ultimately we need to come back to you folks and get approvals for that. So the two sketches that I provided, simply, I have the first one up on the screen, which is the existing condition. And the only reason we did this plan was to show the council and the neighborhood that there are 29 parking spaces existing based on city code. The property that we're looking at is this property here, the corner of Whipple and Main Street. And we're looking at parking between Elm Street and Fry Street, all the way along this corridor.
Mr. Mayor, Mike, could you kind of characterize the topography of that lot, because I think that's kind of critical to the discussion. The
lot that we're looking at is at grade at Main Street, drops significantly to the back. Whipple Street goes down 10, 12 feet in elevation. So the development that we'll do on this site will end up with a retaining wall around the project. If I can skip to concept 2, which is what we sent you, you can see the plan layout here. And this would require a planning board, a retaining wall around the edge, and there would be stormwater control back here in the back of the property.
And that kind of prevents you from accessing directly onto Whipple Street.
Yeah, we can't get access direct to Whipple Street.
Now it's the two-dimension looked great.
Yeah.
But now that I recall that property, so
yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, this concept that we showed the neighbors is the least impact on the parking on the street, or on a total count of parking in the neighborhood, let's put it that way. We're proposing under this plan to continue the center turn lane, but move it to the west. We'll eliminate 4 spaces in this location here. All the other spaces on this side, on the east side of Main Street, will remain. And we'll have to eliminate 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 spaces over in this location, and these 3 here, so there'll be 8. So we'll be eliminating 12 spaces, and we are proposing to install 11 spaces on Whipple Street along the property line, which I think would require motion for you folks to allow parking on our side of the road. Right now, the Whipple Street right-of-way or pavement is only 24 feet wide, and we would need to widen that pavement out to 30, 32 feet to be able to allow parking on it. We're also willing to provide parking on Curtis to make sure that we don't lose spaces, and we have a net increase, so we'd widen that road as well. And we've offered to do some improvements on other folks' lands. There's parking available in the neighborhood on multiple properties here. And there could be parking developed at this location or this location if neighbors are willing to work with us, we're willing to work with them.
So, if I may, thank you. So that parking on Whipple and/or Curtis, that would be not only for people going to the business?
That would be public parking on the public street, within the public right-of-way.
Now, it's within the public right-of-way.
The sidewalk would end up being pushed over to our property in this layout, and we'd give the city an easement for the sidewalk, but the parking
And that
would be.
would come out in the design.
Yeah, in all the design plans, we would come out with a plan that shows how that can all occur
So you're
within
looking
the
at a
right-of-way.
net,
Net loss of one with this concept with just the 11 spaces on Whipple. Obviously, they're not as convenient to the businesses and apartments, but I think during our initial discussions with staff and police, and I know from a technical perspective that safety along Main Street will be better if we can eliminate the parking on Main Street for the community. It will cause problems for the business that we need to address that impact. And we're willing to go through the studies to show folks that we can do that. We'll convince everybody is another question, but we're certainly willing to do that.
So Mike, while by code, this is the number of spots that are there, those spots aren't currently delineated, are they? On the street?
No, the city does not strike parking, so typically you'll get more people parking.
And that's my point, is that I think while we're looking at this as, maybe 29, I think you said 29 by code, we're probably more realistically parking maybe closer to 40 people on that
I
street?
don't think you'll get that high, but you could park, and we can determine that, by going out and doing counts and stuff, but I'll bet you get, 35, okay? Because there are driveways and telephone poles and hydrants that stop you from parking.
Okay.
So, yes, small compact cars, they'll pack in, okay? They'll park behind each other and it will work.
I know
So-
without lines, people do.
Yes, and we're not proposing, at the end of the day, if we do this plan here, we wouldn't propose to stripe the spaces. So in theory, we'd leave the same space available, and if more cars can park, then more cars will park.
Right. My concern is that, while it looks like a net loss of 1, it could be a net loss of 6 or 7.
6 or 7, and again, what we're committed to do, and we'll talk with the neighbors and we'll talk with city staff about this, is to make sure there is no loss of parking in the neighborhood. And when we talk about the neighborhood, we're talking about Whipple, Curtis, Main Street, and, Elm Street, Oak, whatever around the other side of the road. We're also willing to put another crosswalk in across the street to make sure pedestrian movements can work back and forth, similar to the new crosswalk that was put in at Fry Street,
Okay.
with the safety cones and things like that. Again, we haven't done all those studies because it's going to be costly, and if there's no interest because of the business opposition, there's no interest, and we can do something different.
Okay. I know Councilor Lyson and I just jumped on you with questions. Were you all set in your
Yeah, I
presentation?
think we're all
Okay,
set.
we're at that point. So
Yep.
if anyone else in the council has questions for Councilor Marcotte?
Not so much questions as comments. Reading some of the emails, et cetera, this past couple of days, I agree that parking is a very important commodity to the neighbors. And eliminating parking is a very difficult thing for me to do. However, on the flip side of that, I do patron a business further down Main Street, and when I park it might even be striped, I'm not sure, I can sit there for 20 minutes waiting to get out of my vehicle. So from that perspective, I'm thinking parking on Main Street should be looked at as something that we should eliminate over time. So I can see it from both perspectives. As long as ample parking is provided as an alternative to Main Street, I can support it. But if Main Street goes away and there's nothing alternative for the neighbors, then I'd have some more difficulty.
Thank you for your comment. That's exactly what we wanted to know. If folks don't have any interest in making changes, then we can stop. But if folks have interest, then we can do the studies and work with the neighbors, multiple meetings, whatever it takes, for us to work through the process and try to get this thing done. It will make it better for the community if we can relocate. This facility we're looking at for NOM is a bigger parcel so that we can make it work more efficiently and eliminate the problems where the current location is at 319 Main Street. So I think it'll make it better.
Councilor Bean?
You were talking about crosswalks.
Yes.
And you're committed to doing all these things. But have you passed that by the city? Because I know that sometimes we've petitioned for flashing lights or crosswalks or stop signs, and it isn't really that easy to just put those things up.
Understand, I've been doing a lot of this permitting stuff for a lot of years.
Okay.
And we are willing to do it, but we know we need approvals from folks, you and others. And
Yes.
the traffic engineers may say, no way, we don't need another crossing, we won't put it in. If the traffic engineers say we need one, we're happy to put it in. So we're looking at changing the parking in this neighborhood at no cost to the city, and we're looking to come in and do this and help the neighborhood out and transition that parking off Main Street. if we can.
I think before, I don't know how this is just like brand new, and, but I don't think I would want to say, go right ahead, and we'll hope that all the permitting will go through and that you'll be able to have all the right crosswalks and have all the right parking places. I think I'd have to have that in place before I would say, okay, get rid of the parking spots.
And we do expect to come back to you with a precise plan that says if this project goes forward with the permits as we know it today, here are the spaces that would be changed, and we would have a plan for you. Again, we're just, should we go forward or should we stop, is where we're at.
Councilor Payne?
So I'm in the same boat sort of as Councilor Marcotte. I'm excited to see a proposal to remove parking over there. I utilize the bank just a little bit further down the road, and there's always people on foot down there. Unfortunately, we did have a loss of life recently down there, so removing parking down there is a good thing and to keep people safe, and it's nice to see that pedestrians are high on the attention for this. If we can move the parking, if that makes it easier, I'm all for that, but I would like to see this move forward, and I think it's a better design for Main Street, and I think it's a safer design, which is something that we need to prioritize, as a city and development. And I'm excited to see, for what I can remember for my whole life down here, a vacant grass lot. So I'm very excited to see something going in there, and I'd like to see it, move forward. So
This schematic that I put on the screen was a schematic that mirrored the Dirigo place that just did the center turn lane, and this would eliminate all the parking, which would make our challenge for off-street parking more difficult. But we're willing to do whatever the public safety people say.
I think that's an important part too, is you guys realize that it is an important commodity to some, to try to seek a remedy to that.
Councilor Ray?
Thank you. So thank you both for your presentation today. I think a lot of the concerns that I'm hearing are about the parking, so it's helpful to have, multiple ways of looking at this. Again, I'm usually in favor of eliminating parking, but I think understanding these uses better would be really critical, and also during construction, thinking about how parking can be preserved during that period of time is really critical to the community and the neighborhood. I'm sure we'll be hearing from the public on this, given the volume in the room. So I'm definitely not willing to say I'm totally in support or not in support at this point, because I think it's really important that neighbors' voices are heard. Even though this would be helpful for your business, I think taking into consideration what the community need is really critical here.
Okay.
So I think it's definitely something we need to approach cautiously. I am never in favor of removing parking, so I'm kind of on the other end of the spectrum, but I'm also mostly known to be pro-business, pro-resident in a lot of issues like this before, so I do kind of have a push-pull between, Mr. Boulay and his business, and being able to, expand that business and potentially enhance the neighborhood, but I'm also going to be very receptive to, the residents, the people who live there, and the effects on them, and I know some of them will be perceived and some of them will be very real, and I think we really have to balance all of that, and, before I make a final decision, I don't get a vote in the end, I'm just the mayor, but I will listen. I will listen to the residents as well as they are here, and with nothing further from the council.
Just one,
Councilor Pleasant.
just one small point. You mentioned, Mike, the traffic study, and I think, as both a planner and an engineer myself, I mean, that's going to go a long way on a design as well. I mean, that input. And obviously, it's hard to get a design until you find out what the traffic engineer is. So it's like, catch-22, sort of. So, but I think that's going to be important to the planning board as well. I think it's going to be required as far as talking to planning and code, that a traffic study because of the traffic movement here. And there's lots. And one other question I have, if I can, what's the stacking you have around the drive-through? Have you approximated that?
We have, I think, 10 spaces of stacking, but this is going to be a double drive-through with a mobile line so that we can move people through even faster than typically.
Okay.
Code traffic movement permits require 8, so we have that met, but we're going to be able to put more people through this site.
Yeah.
And we're on the AM side of the road, so traffic's going to be a little bit better. But again, those are technical things that we will have addressed.
Yeah. I go back and forth for the one the one on Main Street at Strawberry, and both morning and earlier this afternoon, there was 12 cars in the queue. So good for business, good for people wanting your product, and you've got to figure out ways how to make it safe and how to make it convenient, because otherwise they won't come. So I know that's your task. Thank you, Matt.
No problem. I just want to remind, before I open it up for the public comment, to the residents, this is very, very early in this process. So the fact that, we appear to have a majority of councilors at the moment looking to see the next step and move forward is by no means a rubber stamp, from this body or any body. There's still quite a process, as Mr. Gatto knows, in front of him, before anything is finalized. So this is very early on in the process. Just, please keep that in mind. And with that, actually, if you guys want to stay there, because if someone has a specific question for you guys, that if you're willing to entertain, step up to the podium. Just please state your name, your address, speak into the mic so the people at home can hear you, and the floor is open for the public. Don't all run up there at once.
My name is Chris Aceto. I own the gray apartment building directly across from the site. First of all, I wanted to comment on the idea that there's 29 parking spaces on Main Street. There's 44. Interestingly, inserted into that was code-compliant parking. There is no code-compliant parking as exists on Main Street. In other words, like you would see on the West End in Portland, on Parkside in Portland, or on Main Street in Lewiston. Cars park bumper to bumper, or as close as they can. So from the beginning of my property line on both sides to Fry Street, there are 44 existing spaces. Those would not be code compliant. If you look at those little yellow lines, there's still lots of space in front and back of each car on that schematic where there's extra space. In other words, when you build a parking lot this day and age, you allow for far more space than in the real world where people park. So the idea that there's 29 is not it doesn't pass the smell test. There's 44 on that street. Second, I own that building, and Dunkin' Donuts is asking for small-scale businesses in historical homes on this street to give away their parking so that they can come into the neighborhood. That's the problem I have with the project. They are saying you can park on Whipple Street cross the street on a 12-foot decline, on a street that declines from top to bottom by 12 feet. So when people in my 20-unit apartment building are parking in the winter, they're expected now, instead of parking directly in front of the street, in front of the building, and having that convenience to cross the street, park on Whipple Street, could be 50 feet away from the building and up in elevation, whereas now they park directly in front of the street. People who work in this building would be aghast if the city took away their parking on Pine Street and this side street here and say, we're going to have a parking lot 50 feet away. And that's what they're asking area businesses to do. We're going to eliminate your parking, and in doing so, we're going to create new parking, which is not created because there's not 29 parking spaces on that street. There's 44. And park them on Whipple Street. If you create parking on Whipple Street, my 20-unit building will be parking on Main Street, in front of Elder Law Care, in front of 444 Main Street, in front of Rainbow Realty. They're not going to be crossing the street and going down a 12-foot elevation in the ice and snow to park down there. You know, so they're asking Dunkin' Donuts. Imagine if Dunkin' Donuts came into the...
Oh, use the mic, Chris, please.
I don't think it's working. Okay, it is working.
It is.
Imagine if Dunkin' Donuts had to have their people park 45 feet away. That's what you're asking small-scale businesses on Main Street. You're asking them park 40 to 65 feet away from your building, from your buildings where there's residences living, professional residences living, elderly people living in my building for 10, 12, 14, 18 years, and you're asking them to walk. Imagine the outrage if you asked Dunkin' Donuts, you can have the Dunkin' Donuts, but there's not going to be any parking next to you. You're not going to be able to pull in and get a coffee or a donut. You have to park 40 feet away. They'd be out of business. And that's what you're asking us to do. I think that's, I mean, I could go on, but I think that sums it up. The reality, the real world is that there's far more parking existing now on Main Street than the project site developer is claiming. He's just made the discrepancy now to you, Mayor, Mr. Mayor, that there's more than 29. He hedged and said 35 when you said 40. There's 44. So it's disingenuous to come to the meeting and say there's 29 parking spaces and we're creating 11 new ones. You're creating them way off-site. See that dirt lot on the corner? That's my parking lot. I bought that. Nobody uses it. It's off-site parking. I bought it just in case. There's an aerial view with not one car parked there. Can you point to where my gray building is, please? That's my building there. People not going to rent in a building, in a professionally maintained, well-maintained historical building, even if you provide free parking in a dirt lot that's around the bend. 0 people park there 365 days a year. Someone wants to buy it, Dunkin' Donuts, if you guys want to buy it, we'll sell it to you. Actually, we'll do a quick claim deed. You can have it. I don't need it because it doesn't do anything for me. So that's the biggest problem I have. If any other business wanted to go in and not eliminate parking at all on Main Street, I'd be fine with it. This idea of creating like a satellite lot on Whipple Street is just, like, to me, disingenuous. It's not going to be used. And my tenants, who are really my business, that's my business people, they don't buy a product other than to live in the building. It's not a retail establishment. They're going to park on Main Street and block some of the people's businesses who are there now. Any questions from the council?
Thank you, Chris. Anyone else? Public comment?
Hello, Kevin Jolly from 444 Main Street. I'm the owner. I currently have about 9 tenants that are counselors that work there day to day. And believe me, I'm not here. I own stock in Dunkin' Donuts. I have their coffee every day. It's you know, so I'm not here actually because having a Dunkin' Donuts there wouldn't really bother me that much, except the parking is a little bit of an issue. In that I'm lucky at 444 Main Street. I have some parking. I worked with David back 10 years ago and have some parking, but with the number of people in and out on a daily basis, that extra parking is vital to maintain that business that they work with. And unfortunately, losing some of that parking would mean that I'd probably lose some of the tenants that I currently have there. So,
Could you hit his building?
I did. I'm sorry, I put the hand on it.
it's the colonial, red colonial building.
Yeah, in the corner of Curtis.
Yeah. So there has been some plans or alternate plans to add parking, which actually may assist personally me, but it really won't, because I think there is going to be a domino effect in that parking that was used by Chris's tenants there would eventually find themselves going and parking in those spaces. So eventually it does have that domino effect where parking is going to be just moving and spreading out. And I think I have some tenants here that are here today that might be able to talk. So, but in any case, again, nothing personal against Dunkin' Donuts. I love them. I think it would be great there. If it had nothing to do with parking, I wouldn't be here today. So, thank you.
Thank you, Kevin.
Good evening. I'm Kathleen Kienitz, and I own 443 Main Street. I have my law offices there. I bought the building maybe 13 years ago, lost track. When I bought it, it was occupied by a bunch of therapists, and it still is. Like the gentleman who spoke before me, I'm sorry, I forget your name. Kevin. Between them, I think there's 6 right now. I have a vacant office that I have 2 people coming to look at. Parking is a huge issue. When I bought the building, I tore down the little garage and pulled out a really pretty little tree in the backyard to build a little parking lot. Very tiny parking lot, hard to maneuver in, but it's exclusive to me and my clientele. I have, at this point, there are 5 of us, staff-wise, and I have clients coming and going all day long, every business day. The therapists, as they did before I bought the building, rely strictly on on-street parking, as do their clients. And the current configuration of parking is not beautiful, it's not wonderful, but it's tolerable. They're able to generally park pretty near the building, and they're generally able to avoid having to cross the street to come to the building. As we just heard, you start reconfiguring the parking, Whipple Street is ridiculous. I have elderly clients, my tenants have elderly, disabled clients. Nobody is going to want to maneuver going uphill and crossing Main Street to get to the building. And then there's already the Bates the Bates College parking crunch. Parking is a huge, huge issue. And frankly, if this happens, I probably won't be able to fill tenancies in my office as they come up. I've put a lot of money into that building, and I've put the money into it to encourage people to want to rent from me, which they do. It's a really beautiful space. My assessment has gone up. I'm assessed on the basis of being an income-producing property. I'm going to lose that if I lose the parking. I like Dunkin' Donuts, too. I prefer Dunkin' Donuts to Starbucks. And what's wrong with the current Dunkin' Donuts? We have one several blocks down in my opinion, much more appropriate spot where there are lots of little businesses. Putting it there, yeah, it's an empty lot. It's not an unattractive empty lot. I understand the owner wanting to sell the lot, to develop it. I have no problem with that. I think an office building that had its own parking within the lot would be fine. Or an apartment building, again, as long as it's not taking up our parking. The other issue is just the feel of the neighborhood. My building, and I think Chris's, and maybe one beyond that, are in what was designated the historical area of Lewiston. And I'm proud of that, and I have been cognizant of that when I've made improvements to my building. You can drive by my building right now. I spent a ton of money rebuilding the porch in a historically conformative manner. I could have just done a slapdash thing. I didn't, because the buildings there are beautiful, and I think that's really important to the nature of Lewiston. I wish we would be rezoned, actually. I don't think it's an appropriate spot for a Dunkin' Donuts. Aside from the parking, it's going to create hazards for people crossing streets that have to go back, who are losing spots. As has been pointed out, there was already one person killed, and I don't believe that was the result of the parking. I think it was the result of the crazy driving and the amount of traffic. And, with 10 cars deep in Dunkin' Donuts all day long, you're just moving that congested traffic up closer to a very heavily residential, heavily pedestrian trafficked area. So if this goes through, you're basically doing it to the benefit of one business that is already nicely situated and doesn't necessarily, of course I don't know your business plan, but from what I can observe, that business is doing very, very well. And so you're going to take an already thriving business, put it in another spot where it's going to detract from a bunch of other businesses. There are at least 5 or 6 of us that, the apartment building, my office building, the office building across, there's New Beginnings, there's the Rainbow building, there's the church. You're really gonna mess with a lot of our livelihoods if this goes through. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathleen.
Didn't get to respond.
Tim Kelly. I own 437 Main Street there. Beautiful old building, another historical building built in 1847. We bought it. It was pretty much falling down, had been abandoned for 2 years. And, we put a value of about $100,000 already into that building, and we plan on putting another $50,000 to $100,000 more into it also to continue to restore that. We have the church there. I'm the pastor there. And we have quite a few constituents from our congregation here tonight too that this would drastically affect. We have small children, elderly folks. If we start parking a block and a half away, again downgrade with small children, all the way down to infants coming across that street, that would be a great hindrance to us and really a deterrent of more folks, coming to our congregation, because we are growing. We're growing every year. We're growing in size. But all these things, we're in a day of convenience also, and people will take their business. They'll take their livelihoods other places, which will affect our livelihoods. And with Chris's apartments, if you take away parking, he'll have to lower the rent, and he'll get less income for that. we will be greatly affected. We meet there normally 4 different nights a week, plus many times in between. We have classes. We've got music lessons there. We're always having parking there. And what happens when it starts filling up, we've got to push on down, and we've had to park a block away many times. And now Bates College is coming out of Fry Street, and they are coming into that same parking area also. So now we are already congested. We already have a lack of parking, and now we're going to take some of that away. This is not a matter of slowing the traffic down. We really do not have a speed problem on that area of Main Street, because usually there's too much traffic. It's already slow enough. And if we add another crosswalk there, that would really slow it up. It's already a bottleneck. And I totally understand how the officials would love to clear the street parking there. It would make it a safer place. But what about us? By eliminating that, our property values are going down. I own from Main Street all the way to Oak Street, and so I own that green spot there also. And that grade there, from Main Street down to Oak Street, you're talking probably another 12-foot drop there. So in order to turn that into parking, you have to do a massive handicap ramp. I mean, with switchbacks like crazy to get it up to where it goes. And then it still would have to go clear up to the front of the buildings, and it would not be a very practical space. We lost our parking on Oak Street without any notification, which we depended upon, and now we're looking at losing our parking on the front side. So these are real issues for us, and the businesses around. And again, like some have said, for one business to come in with a few employees to knock out potentially 40 different employees that are represented by our businesses right there in this neighborhood, I can't see how that would be progress. I'm a Dunkin' Donuts lover. We have it in the home. I went there today even. I went to his place up around Strawberry Ave. Oh, I love it. We're not against Dunkin', okay? Maine runs on Dunkin', okay? We know, understand that. But right here, this is one of those neighborhoods that would be heavily impacted. There are 2 kinds of businesses. The kind of business that wants to draw traffic, right? And then there's the kinds of businesses that do not want to draw traffic. We are that second type. We are the kind of businesses that we don't need more traffic flow there. And that's our whole neighborhood there is built on that kind of businesses. I can't imagine in the wintertime having to walk a block and a half, almost 2 blocks down Whipple Street to catch. Because again, the domino effect's going to take place. Everybody's going to keep pushing down, and no one will be able to park in front of their own places, and they'll all have to go on down, all so that we can make way and make convenience for, this gentleman here with his business. I've been a business owner my whole life too. I understand business. I really do. But there has to be a better place. So this would lower our property values, the investments that we put into it. These are our livelihoods, and we're not big businesses. We're the little people, and a lot of times the little people don't even get a voice, and we get pushed out, and it doesn't make headlines because there aren't that many of us, and we don't have much clout. We don't have the money to try to push back either many times. So we just ask, that you would just consider for the community right there. You potentially are going to destroy that little community there, and again, our livelihood also. I really don't see how we can even give up 6 or 7 spaces. I really don't. It's already a problem, and will make it, much more difficult for people to come across the street, especially heavy traffic, weather. So, anyway, Council, do you have any questions for any of us?
Councilor Ray.
So for the church itself, so we heard from some other folks that they have a lot down the street or a couple spots. Does the church have no designated parking spots then?
We don't. We have a handicap van, and so in our parking lot we have our 2 private cars, But we actually have 5 vehicles. And so whenever we have meetings, we have to pull our vehicles out of the parking lot right by our place and park them on the street.
So it's a residential space as well? Is that what you're
Yes.
saying? Okay.
Yes,
thank
we
you.
live there also. It's
Okay.
a church, and we live there, and there's apartments in there too. And we have a construction business out of there too. It's multifunctional.
Okay, so it's not just the, okay.
Right, right. And so we have to move our people out. We have to move our vehicles out because we have a handicap van that cannot maneuver in our space when there's other vehicles there. So we have two spaces under a carport, and so we can only leave them there. So this is very important to us. Like I say, we lost our Oak Street parking. We relied on that, and nobody notified us for that.
What do you mean you lost it?
There's no parking there during certain hours of the day or evening now.
Is that the overnight parking ad?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
and we're there overnight. We needed those spaces for our vehicles, but now we're out onto Main Street, and we're taking some of Chris's spaces, which we hate that. You know, sometimes we can pop over in some other neighbors' parking lots, but it's not really conducive many times because of the weather and situations, and other businesses have their own spaces too. So that's our situation. Anybody else?
Thank you, Tim.
You're welcome.
Hi, Council. My name is Adela Muhammad, and I live at 481 Main Street in Lewiston. I'm Chris's wife, and I just wanted to reiterate some points, but also add on that not only do we own property on Main Street, we also live on Main Street. We bought our home on Main Street, which we also run our 3 businesses out of the first floor of Main Street. When my clients come to meet me, even though we have 2 off-street parking spots, it's difficult to navigate up Mount David into the spots. The convenience of parking on the street is preferable to them because they can just pull on out. If we eliminate the parking further down, that's just going to push more parking in front, even further down, and we live at 481 Main Street as well. So I also want to reiterate about the parking situation with our residential apartment building. I was the chair of the Downtown Neighborhood Action Committee, and we were responsible for getting overnight parking during the wintertime established. And one of the reasons why we did that, particularly in the downtown area, but it also impacts other areas of Lewiston, is that we found it very difficult when we made improvements to our apartment buildings to get the caliber of tenant to rent there. Since we've had on-street parking at our building, the vacancy rate has drastically decreased. We're able to attract professional tenants, whereas before we were unable to do so, because the first thing they ask is, where is the parking? And displacing this parking will not only affect our ability to attract these tenants in the future, but it'll also impact our ability to keep the vacancy rates low. As Chris mentioned, we also have several small children that live in the building, and my children, we live on Main Street. My oldest is 14 years old, and he has difficulty navigating across the street. So I can't understand how an elderly person or an individual with 2 small children would be able to do so. When we would cross the street just to go to Sunnyside Park, it was a hit or miss type deal. So to encourage that type of cross street for kids and elderly is just irresponsible. I also want to note that we're encouraging kicking the donut down the street, so to speak, into an area that is calmly residential in the evening. My husband and I, we walk from Main Street to downtown Lewiston quite frequently. And you can see the character of the neighborhood when you slow and pass the Rainbow Realty area. It comes and you can readily identify that you're in a residential area. Now, if we start pushing corporate entities down further into our neighborhood, we're changing that entire character that I thought that I was getting when I moved here almost 18 years ago. And I don't think we have the full representation of the number of businesses that are going to be impacted by this change, but I think it's something that the council must carefully consider. I also don't think that when we're talking about on-street parking and safety, I think that's kind of a really mute issue, because it's like saying to increase safety, we have to eliminate parking on Congress Street in Portland. It doesn't make any sense. You know, people in a city park on streets. And if people get accustomed to doing that, and they've been so for several years, there's no issue in talking about this safety, so to speak. The safety comes into play when we encourage people to cross back and forth. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Adela.
My name's Eric Bowmaster. I work with Tim Kelly there at 437 Main Street. I'm his assistant. I am one of those families that attend there, and I'm one of the ones with a large family. I drive a large Ford E250 van as a 12-passenger, and I have it completely filled. I have 10 children living at home, ages 18 down through 7 months old. So for me, to be parking across the street, especially in wintertime, and then having to go either way up to Fry Street or down to the next street down if a crosswalk would be created there, would be walking that great distance across the highway with 12 people at that point, and then back up the street over to the church. So not just an inconvenience, but a whole family, a large family like that with a lot of young children, that does become a danger when crossing the street. Children are fairly well behaved, but trying to get them all across the street in a short manner can sometimes be difficult. One other point I would like to make that hasn't been brought up so far is whenever we start to move parking out into other locations, specifically was stated on the lower end of the green lot there down that street. I forget what name the street is. But once you start moving the spots into other locations, people from those locations are then going to start utilizing that extra parking that they have. Thus, there would not be a net increase in parking because other entities would then be utilizing that parking that's now closer to them. So at that point, we are now at an increased disadvantage because what would be created for us would then be utilized by other businesses or other residents that are down those streets. The dirt lot down on the corner that I believe Chris said that he owns, if that was paved, turned into public parking, people in those lower areas would start to utilize that free space. So we still wouldn't have any place to park. So we have to take into consideration human nature, more parking in their areas that are outside of our area, then we still don't have the parking. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Okay. Anyone else to offer public comment?
Good evening. My name is Jean Dupree. I bought that piece of land at 420 Main Street 23 plus years ago. It had 6 dilapidated buildings hanging there, 400 violations in them. prior to my buying. The Allen Corner Market was on the very corner that got taken out prior to my owning. That's probably the building that I would have saved amongst them all, but I seriously reviewed this property, and one big decision I did is bought in commercial community business zone. So I feel for you people that are concerned about stuff, about parking, but I created a lot of parking there. I tore down a lot of, and I'm a hard worker. I put my tool belt on every day, climb ladders, up and down, run, and I have 4 kids, and 2 in college, 1 going in next year. I have a lot going on. I graduated from St. Dom's High School, Holy Cross before that. You can dig in your pockets and find space on your lots. You have a nice green space there behind your building, especially your church, in your home. You have someone that's willing to help you make parking. Wow. I didn't have that. I dug, and I tore down, and they created space. I'm a lifelong resident of Lewiston, so I'm just a little guy like you guys. But I've worked hard for what I got, and I'm still working hard. So if Mr. Boulay decides not to go there, something else will. Something else that maybe not so neighborhood-oriented. Something much taller. Something that's going to take a lot more parking. It could happen. So maybe we have to count our blessings with what we got now coming in. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dupree. Okay. Anyone else from the public? Okay. Mr. Boulay.
Get to respond real quick. So there was a lot covered there. When we look at Mike's design, the parking that where we're talking about eliminating is here, and in front of the property itself. We're not looking at eliminating any spaces along here. So we also, I understand the concern about crossing the street, and that's why we were proposing a crosswalk. I'm sure the city councils before you have heard the same argument on Main Street, up and down Main Street for years, that if we eliminate the parking, it's going to destroy Main Street. We heard the same argument at Strawberry Avenue when the state proposed that light. They pretty much had a lynch mob out there against Dunkin' Donuts when it had nothing to do with us. It was a state project. Those neighborhoods are much safer now, better off. There's a crosswalk there. They can cross the street safely. This neighborhood has not been destroyed. So that's why we're trying to work with the citizens and with you guys' help. If we could come up with a solution to provide better parking for everybody, we're willing to do it at no cost to the city. But one of your councilors said eventually it's going to happen on Main Street. I mean, progress always moves up and down Main Street, and there is no property available on Main Street. So I can understand the anxiety, but when I look at the situation, there's some of the things we were proposed in front of those businesses is a 2-hour parking limit during the weekdays when people need to get in and out of those businesses so their customers can access the businesses and it's not being taken up by somebody parking there all day long. It would be all-day parking on the side streets, eliminating the congestion for the businesses. We're also looking at provided parking on Curtis for the business with the multiple tenants and the rehab. New Beginnings that also expressed maybe leasing spaces and leasing out areas in their parking lot. So that's something we could look at also to help that business with the counselors. So there is a lot of options there if we can just keep an open mind and work together. And we're also looking at Oak Street. Maybe having a parking added back on Oak Street, and we do something where providing a walkway to Mr. Ceto's building or something like that. I mean, we're willing to look at all these options to help improve it for not only myself, but them also. So I understand the concerns, and I know it's a long process, but if they could come up with some suggestions, or if we could work with the city staff to see if any of those things could help out with this situation, we're more than willing to do it as part of the project. This is not necessarily the final decide, so we just hope we keep an open mind, and maybe we can work through some of these issues that they need to addressed. And that's about all I got.
Okay, before I run back to the council, I realized I forgot David Hediger between this presentation and the meeting. It's even written right here, Gatto Hediger Public. I don't know how I missed it. But David, if you have anything to add before I turn the council loose again?
No, I don't think so.
All right, smart man. And I'll bring it back to the council if anyone has any brief closing comments. Councilor Ray.
For Mr. Hediger. Could you tell us or give us an indication if any of that on-street parking on Main is time limited currently, or is it a free-for-all?
Actually, I looked to the neighbors. I don't really know if it's, no. It's free.
It's not a free-for-all. It works well the way it is.
Oh, I just meant all hours.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah,
Thank
There's
you.
no signs,
And
right?
the idea that it'd be 2-hour limit, if it's self-regulated now, is bizarre, because I don't need, those businesses on the street working for expressly well now. And the idea of these satellite lots, everyone on Main Street is against it. I just heard new beginnings, my goodness, will East Street, meaning pay? Now I'm here, we'll pay for parking. I heard the word,
I'm not seeing 2 hours anywhere in our packet.
it was just pitched by Dunkin' Donuts.
Oh,
It was in one of the suggestions maybe to help the businesses,
thank you.
because the building is taking all the spaces.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. We'll get to the council for a bit.
And then my question for Mr. Boulay, you're off the hook, Dave, was what are the hours of this proposed?
That opens at 5 and most likely be closing at 11, same as the current location now.
And you would be closing the location across from CM?
Yeah, we close now at 11.
But would you be keeping that
Yes,
business
we
open?
would close
or-
it, yes.
okay. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else on the council? Questions, comments, concerns? Okay, I will say, thank you, Mr. Burley, Mr. Gatto. Thank you to the public who came out today to either speak or to listen. I hope, Mr. Burley, Mr. Gatto, that the public is heated in their concerns. And I hope, mistakes of past developers and not including enough of the public are not repeated. I think we got a good team here. I think there's a lot of work to do with the public, and I'm not sure how that's going to turn out. I think we definitely see that there is a lot of disagreement between what we read in books about parking and what the people on the ground actually see about parking. There's a reason I'm usually not in favor of eliminating it, and I think Adila was the one who touched on it. Parking increases marketability, plain and simple. You don't have a place to park, people aren't going. They're not walking a quarter mile to go home. It's not happening in most neighborhoods. So thank you guys again for coming out, and have a wonderful night.
Yeah,
Thank you.
And speaking of the character of neighborhoods, Mr. Hediger will work right into number 2 on the agenda. We went from 15 minutes to 5, just letting you know.
Yeah, so it's 7 o'clock, so I don't know how, I'm going to let Doug do most of the talking here, but certainly if you're looking to cap this, give us some direction.
Let's make sure we get through it.
Okay.
we'll go ahead and get started then. Appreciate it, Mayor and Council.
All you, Doug.
So last time we were in front of you talking about NCA, was at the June 12th meeting workshop. We talked about presenting information to you about a number of duplexes and multifamily homes that are present in the NCA district. We had discussions about the regulations. We presented a text amendment that suggested removing the ability to convert single-family homes into duplexes. At the end of that workshop, the council suggested that we go back and to the drawing board, do some more analysis, do some more thinking about the NCA situation with conversions of single-family homes into duplexes. So we did that, and in the memo that we presented to you, we took a look further at some options and other things that came up during the staff analysis of all this. We posed some questions that we put here into the memo, things like we wanted to go back and take a moment to actually ask the question, what is the NCA district for? What's the purpose? And I think it was good to go back and look at that it is meant to promote neighborhood stability by requiring the development of new buildings or the reuse or conversion of existing buildings to conform to the type and density of existing housing within the immediate neighborhood, that there is limited ability to do conversions into duplexes, but they should be in character to the surrounding area. We also took a look at what the comprehensive plan says about neighborhood stability. I think that's one of the things that's driving this discussion is do conversion of single-family homes into duplex, does that have a negative impact on the neighborhood? Which we also pose that question as well. In the comprehensive plan, it does speak very clearly to wanting to see regulations that would enhance and keep neighborhoods stable. One of the things that came up was a recommendation to consider looking at accessory dwelling units as a possible alternative to in-law apartments and possibly as an alternative to duplex conversions. But there also, we asked the question about whether two-family dwellings and multifamily dwellings in the NCA district was detrimental. I think our opinion is as much a concern about owner-occupiedness of that is of a greater concern in some respects than what building or what housing type is there. We also looked at how many conversions of single-family homes into duplexes have occurred over, say, the last 5 years. Not a great number. We came up with 3. And then we also just take a basic look at what residential types are allowed in the NCA district by permitted right. And you can have single-family dwellings. Of course, that's the basic housing type for the NCA district. You have two-family dwellings, but that's subject to the criteria that also was an attachment in your packet, what criteria are necessary to be present to allow a duplex to be converted from a single-family home. And then you're allowed to have in-law apartments as a permitted use in the NCA district. We also included all the criteria that are in place for in-law apartments. So I think what we wanted to try to do in the brief amount of time that was allotted, we wanted to pose the question to you whether you wanted to keep your focus tonight in this short period of time on the NCA district and the duplex conversion. As you can see, the staff also brought up either other options and ideas about thinking about in-law apartments versus accessory dwellings. So both topics are important, but we wanted to kind of take a moment before we went further into this to gauge your interest tonight with the time we have available.
Okay, I'll give it a start. How's that? Since I did bring this up to Dave after significant resident concern. I think my lean here is going to be to go to number 1 as much as I love number 3. Number 3 sounds great, but I think a lot of this, the NCA has already been infiltrated with some homes, and there are some areas where it may be very appropriate to do a conversion. So I think an overlay district still allows that to happen and then prohibits it in the rest of the NCA and puts it to bed. I do think talking about in-laws is very important. I think people aging in place and elder issues are very important issues, but I think that's a separate issue to this conversation. I'm happy to have that conversation, but I think that's a different time, different issue to have that conversation. You know, I think we just heard a couple comments in the last presentation from some people in neighborhoods, different kinds of neighborhoods, you know, about people who thought they were getting one thing and, you know, now they're getting another. I know this is a different situation, but it does still apply. And I think, you know, imagine what people in a single-family neighborhood feel like as opposed to someone who's in a quasi-residential, commercial neighborhood. And I think the other thing that I really want to point out is while there's only been 3 of these recently, we have had for many years a lot of vacancy in our inner city, in our downtown, and that is now gone. We don't have that anymore. Try to find an apartment. Try to find an apartment outside of the downtown. It's very difficult. It's very hard. I see this as a measure that's actually not a response to something that is happening currently, something that happened years ago, yes, but currently not happening, so it's not a response. I see this as very proactive, something that is kind of lacking in municipal government and government in general. I think this is a good move for us as housing gets harder to find in Lewiston to make sure it's being created in a place where it is appropriate. And I think this overlay district really fits in, you know, as you mentioned, with the comp plan and with the goals of the comp plan to keep these developments where it's appropriate and not to, you know, allow them to spread and, you know, diminish the character of a single-family neighborhood. With my comment, my ramble over, I'll turn it over to Councilor Lyson.
Can I start rambling myself? So I really think the accessory dwelling unit focus is really important. I think that could answer some of the questions. I, again, somewhat familiar with it, and again, keeping, we, for better or for worse, edged out our New England neighbors in New Hampshire and Vermont to maintain our #1 oldest state in the Union. So we do have seniors that are looking for space. People, I think the accessory dwelling unit, some of the flexibility in that, and I have to talk a little bit about how do you compute net lot area, stuff like that. But I do think that that's an appropriate, in some places in the city, that, and also a methodology that could help us with affordable housing, especially for our elder populations and smaller households, which is the trend as well. So I'd encourage staff to kind of continue to work on that and develop that as well. The NCA, I think, I agree with the mayor that maybe we can take a look at where it's more appropriate within the NCA and do an overlay district to reflect that. And again, that's been one of the more trickier zones to deal with over the years, that and the NCB, just because you don't know without doing some calculations and what your density is going to be and things like that. So I think the accessory dwelling unit approach needs to be further explored, and I think it's consistent with the comp plan as well, and I think it's will help Lewiston provide affordable housing in appropriate areas for people who are going to be desperately needing it. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Pettengill.
I just wanted to echo the mayor's sentiments. You know, it is important to protect our single-family neighborhoods, and I am excited. It's a conversation I had, you know, last week about being proactive and getting ahead of these things as opposed to being purely reactive. So I like where this is going. Thank you.
Thank you. Coming down the line.
Oh, I'm good for now.
Okay. Councilor Markov.
I didn't hear any discussion as to what the planning board's thinking was. I know there wasn't a recommendation, but I did attend the meeting, and it actually progressed. They were actually at one place towards the beginning of the discussion and another place at the end. I think that's how option 4 developed.
That's correct, and you're correct, Councilor Marcotte, that we didn't put more information there about reporting on what the planning board, their opinions were, but you were there. They were supportive of the idea of looking further into accessory dwelling units. I think they are a little more cautious about the idea of overlays in the sense that they are leaning towards less is more, that they in some ways would like to, would prefer to see less zones. Adding another overlay just adds another layer of regulatory mechanisms, but they were interested in the accessory dwelling units. I think they understood the staff's comments about the overall administration and enforcement of in-law apartments are problematic. But again, and then the other thing I would mention that if we were, this is just outside of the planning board, maybe back to the mayor, with your packet in attachment 3, there was a kind of, I would call a refined map that has been moving towards overlays. They're based on concentrations of multifamily and duplexes. I just would add that it would take more work, which we're happy to do, to come up with more definitions of exactly how those overlays would be established, and we need to look at that more carefully.
Okay, I think you're going in a great direction.
Is there a sense from the council, is what your folks looking for, the overlay at this point, and for us to provide you more information? And the second part to that would be, at some point, this is gonna require someone to initiate an amendment. We've had this discussion before with parking amendments and whatnot. With that, you folks encouraged the planning board to initiate the amendment, and they were all about that. They were in favor of that. With this matter, seeing that it came up from the council, I don't know, I'm sure if at some point you folks will initiate it, but it would be helpful if we had some direction as to if it's overlays you folks want us to work on. Like Doug said, we need to do some more, get you back some more information, and at the same time, if an amendment is desired, someone has to initiate it.
Councilor Lyson?
Do you have an idea of how much of, at least in this map, this is a proposal, an overlay test, basically, but do you know how much percentage of the NCA would be part of the overlay?
A previous map, which I'm not showing you here right now, I think it was around 10% of the overall land area of the NCA. Again, there's some areas that we were concerned about creating all these little islands. It's a challenge to be able to create more unified areas that are easier to recognize as opposed to these little islands that is clearer where the concentrations are. So it's a mapping exercise that we'd be glad to look at how that could happen.
So I think that's less is more. I mean, it's not a large percentage. It's a very small.
No, I think we want to be fair, again, with the emphasis on protecting the single-family neighborhoods. That would be the focus. And again, the assumption would be that outside of any overlay, the duplex conversions would be prohibited, be taken away.
However, accessories and in-laws can still be talked about in that area, not...
And dwelling units.
And, yeah,
We
correct.
wouldn't be making any changes to the in-law, and we could have another discussion about
Okay,
that.
and that, I think that's where I like to be, try to get one of these knocked out, but definitely keep the other one, as Councilor Lyson said, high on the list. Right.
And I would just echo that the current in-law provisions are unenforceable.
Yeah.
I mean, they're enforceable when they're created, but once they're created, we don't know what happens to them. So they effectively become rental units within homes, and I very much like the idea of tying it to home ownership.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because that eliminates the possibility of a single-family home getting an in-law apartment and then becoming a duplex by default, and us never knowing.
Right. Okay. Councilor Marcotte?
I'm hearing a lot of the same discussion that occurred at the planning board level. There were a couple of members that were very vocal about protecting single-family nature of the NCA. And I think it was a consensus that they didn't like the overlay perspective. And what the administrator just said about how in-law apartments seem to, once they're created, there's no enforcement. Planning board really understood that as well. So I'm thinking that we should probably send it back to the planning board to further fine-tune.
Okay.
That we can do that, but to your point, they're not crazy about an overlay.
Yeah.
And
neither am I.
So what's their solution now to allow appropriate areas to have two-family without an overlay.
Honestly, I don't think they see it as being a problem right now, that the NCA isn't necessarily a threat from.
Just leave the standards as they are? Is that what they want?
I think that's an option for them, yeah.
Well, I think a lot of them too, you know, that's where option 4 came from, was the prohibition on converting in there and transition away from the in-law apartments was from one of their recommendations, which I'm less likely to outright prohibit when there are, admittedly, parts of those neighborhoods in the NCA that are they've already changed character. They're not single-family anymore. Maybe they shouldn't be NCA. That's a totally different discussion and a lot more work for you, I think, than an overlay district would be. And personally, I'd rather send something concrete to the planning board instead of sending them, you know, a pile of stuff and saying, you make something out of it. I think if we can come to some kind of a consensus here and send them a more specific proposal, possibly initiated, you know, here at the council level, that would be better than just letting them write the proposal and them being completely off from where we are. I think giving them the direction of where the council's actually going to vote. You know, I look at the trailer ordinance, they completely changed it, and then we completely went back to exactly what we wanted in the first place after the recommendation. So, you know, without muddying the waters too much, I'd rather hand them a specific proposal than.
I don't necessarily disagree, Mayor. I mean, if the council has a direction that they want us to go into, that's helpful for staff.
We want to hand them something specific, or?
I think it'd be appropriate.
All right. Let's continue to massage this.
I think actually, I think the planning board knows a lot more about this stuff than I do. And so I guess my understanding is that the overlay NCA districts would be allowed to change single-family dwellings into two-family dwellings and duplexes. Is that it? And the planning board doesn't like that?
Yeah, the planning board was basically supportive of the idea of limiting, prohibiting the conversions of duplexes into single-family. I think they saw, again, as Mr. Barrett mentioned, more of the benefits that would be gotten from accessory dwellings as opposed to converting duplexes. But again,
so they'd like to do it in the whole district instead of just pieces of the district.
Yeah.
I think what we haven't necessarily discussed is, you know, this discussion was spurred by the NCA district. And you know, as a possible solution or another option is this option 4, right, where we talk about accessory apartments instead of in-laws and whatnot. But that discussion's really been about the NCA. We allow in-laws in every single zoning district in the community, so it's not a problem. In-laws is not a problem limited to the NCA district. It's throughout the city.
Right.
That's where I think the planning board kind of muddied everything up in a place where I think we need to keep them as two kind of distinct issues.
Well, and again, to the direction that the council was looking for us, you folks were looking at us to talk about the NCA. So if our discussion is limited to the NCA, we need some direction on the NCA. The two-family accessory, I think there's a lot of merit in it myself. I think we both agree that's a good thing. That's a discussion that I think we should have beyond the NCA district. That's probably, you know, all residential districts. That's a conversation that we need to have. Again, we're looking for direction on specifically the NCA, our two families, you know, a detriment to the fabric of those neighborhoods. What do we do to curb that? Do we eliminate it? Do we come up with these overlays? You know, what do you want us to do with that NCA district? Council license, right? It's a kind of a mixed match of uses in that district. We could spend an inordinate amount of time on this if we really wanted to, as far as like, okay, well, where are the 3 units in the NCA, and should those be a totally different zoning district altogether? I would suggest we not make it any more difficult than we already are, but.
Correct. Councilor Bean.
So what you're asking us is to decide tonight whether we want to eliminate any duplexes to be built in the NCA district?
That's one option for your consideration.
Buildings being built, or I'm a little confused about what you're asking us to decide.
Nothing, really.
I think we need more direction from the planning board, or direction from you. So we're trying to decide whether we should allow or not allow duplexes to be built.
Correct.
Multifamilies in general.
Multifamily, okay. Just two families,
No, multi.
multifamily.
2, 3, 4.
Okay.
Conversion from in a single-family neighborhood.
Okay, from a single-family unit to multifamily units, and then we're also trying to decide if we should allow annexes to these buildings in order to do this? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, but if you can, separate that portion of it. The main question for the council is, at this point, is in the NCA district, which is traditionally a single-family neighborhood, but certainly has areas that contain 2 or more units, do you want to continue to allow the ability in the NCA district to allow properties to be able to be converted from something other than a single family?
And our 3 options are really allow, not allow, or overlay.
Correct.
If we're breaking it down very simply.
That's correct. And Doug's provided that in your memo there. I think the first 3 options are really,
Could we go to the planning board very specifically and say, give us a recommendation that is either allow, don't allow, or overlay?
We could do
Get in-laws right out of it, just ask for one of those 3 options and see what they recommend to us.
we can do that.
So the allow would be in the whole district?
In the whole district?
Not allow is in
The whole district, and the overlay would be
Where
allow in
appropriate.
one and not in the other.
Appropriate, yeah.
So can the overlay
don't have to notice them,
would
just-
generally be targeting neighborhoods that now have more,
Multifamilies already,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
They would,
And it's
you would
about-
continue to be able to build them there, yet the single-family portions, it would be,
would
Appro-
stay the same.
would stay the same.
And,
So it's
Which would
kinda
keep
like
the
an
character, the whole,
compromise.
correct, it would keep the whole character of both neighborhoods the same.
and my question is how much, what percentage, and they're guessing about 10% would be eligible for the overlay. Is that correct?
That's an approximate assumption.
And so unless we have 4 counselors with a definitive answer on yes, no, or overlay, we can send it to the planning board for that answer?
I have a question.
Council Mark?
You say 10% would qualify for an overlay. So that means 90% already has duplexes?
No, if you look at the mapping that I put up here, and again, this is kind of one iteration of the mapping exercise looking towards possible overlays. If I also go back, there was a chart at your June 12th meeting that had the statistics on the number of single-family lots, the number of duplexes, and number of multifamily structures. The numbers were about that, about 10% of the structures were multifamily or duplexes.
multifamilies, okay, the
And so that's what we would be looking at in an overlay situation scenario, is defining those areas and what percentage of concentration would allow for further conversion of single-family to duplex.
Under the current rules.
Under the current rules, and that's another
Using the
fly in the
current-
ointment, do we want to
Either
take a
the
look at
current
that?
Without,
rules.
without muddying things up too much, leave the current
Either
rules.
the current rules or by right.
Yeah, well, current rules in the overlay district.
Right.
So the basic question is, do we ask the planning board for a simple answer on 1, 2, or 3?
Pretty much. Or do we give them 1, 2, or 3 that is our preference and ask them for their opinion on that answer?
I say we just simply ask them
1, 2, or 3.
1, 2, or 3.
I'm much more
And
comfortable.
if they say 3, then we move on to that in a different,
Unless we all don't like it, we'll just
Yeah,
change it. Okay. So there's the allow, don't allow, or overlay.
That's fine. We'll go back on the 3 options. We'll get some actual numbers on the percentage as well, so that'll be helpful for both, the planning board and the council, and come back to you in October.
Beautiful.
And just to clarify, when Doug was talking about percentages, he was talking about current actual percentages of units, not the percentage of the zone that would be subject to the overlay,
That could be a lot more.
which is a higher percentage.
Correct.
Right. Okay.
Cool.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Thank you, council.
We will recess till, just start the meeting at 7:30. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. At this time, we will receive an update from the newly re-elected president of the Lewiston Youth Advisory Council, Emma Williams.
All right, so the Youth Council for 2018-2019 year is off and running. We had a day-long orientation in August with interacting with municipal staff and participating in leadership training. We have met twice so far, and elections were last evening. Our officers this year are me as chair, Hunter Steele as vice chair, Zachary Morin as treasurer, and Carolyn Adams as secretary. In our orientation, we decided the first thing we wanted to do as a group was to bring attention to some newer and expanding businesses in Lewiston. As such, we went with the name, Let's Get Down to Business, Shine on Lewiston, and began a 6-part series of interviewing businesses and business owners. We filmed 5 businesses last night, and LEX Hunter Steele will be following up with the 6th one. They will be featured twice a week on the city's Facebook page for the next 3 weeks. Last evening, we filmed Michelle Goslin from Aero Air Park, Carly from Rink Advertising, Diana from Sophia FEMA, Courtney from Quiet City Books, and Kayla from Bull Moose. The Rink interview was posted on the city's Facebook page last evening. Our next meeting is in October, and we're going to be brainstorming about Carolyn's idea about enhancing awareness and positive news in Lewiston. We want to meet with local publication representatives and perhaps have a forum on social media where residents can send us positive news about Lewiston. We'll be talking about how we want to share the news with the community. Are there any questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you, Emma. Acceptance of the minutes for June 19 and September 4th. I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve as submitted.
Councilor Lyson. A second.
Second.
Which minute?
Seconded by Councilor Pettengill for June 19th, September 4th. Meetings.
I thought there's only one set of minutes in the...
Yeah, some, I guess, were stuck in the photocopier. Alicia called me today, so some we put in your box this afternoon, if you missed it. So if you're not comfortable, Counselor, you can postpone those until the next meeting if you'd like.
Because I've read the June one was the first.
The June 19th, and then Counselor Ray called and said that she didn't get the 4th in her minute in her binder, so I don't know if there's a problem with the photocopier. So I didn't know who had them and who didn't, so we just made a whole duplicate set and put them in everyone's council box this afternoon. But if you didn't have a chance to read them, we can certainly just do the June ones tonight. We'll bring you the other ones next week so you have time to read them.
I prefer that.
Sure, I would also be more comfortable with that.
Okay, I'll take a new amendment or a new motion.
Motion to accept the minutes of June 19th.
Councilor Lyson with a second from?
Second.
Councilor Pettengill. All in favor? Unanimous. Excellent. Public comment period. Any member of the public comments regarding to city government? And Mr. Sewell.
Hi, Charles Arthur Soul, 135 Bartlett Street, Lewiston, Maine, age 65. As you know, this was a rough summer for Lewiston as far as the gun shops and 2 killings. One of the shootings was behind my building that I live in, and that was 135 and a half. Over the summer, I have tried to aid the Lewiston PD in voicing my opinions on problem areas and individuals. However, they seem to be working by themselves, and we've seen the results of that just summer. Matter of fact, over 30 shots went off, and that's including pellet guns and windows being put out of commercial businesses. I would like to see the Lewiston, City Council try to aid the police department by authorizing them to set up a special task unit with some of the money that they get through forfeitures so that they can go in when reported by an individual or an individual living in an apartment building as to crack dealing and prostitution. I called a number of times 911, and 911, if I ever get to be mayor of this city, is all done. We're going to go back to calling the police department ourselves. 911 is very rude. They keep you on the phone for 3 hours trying to be detectives, and when they should be responding and getting in touch with the departments involved. very disappointed. And then I've called so much that Claire refers to me by name, first name. That's very unprofessional, and I told her I'd want to be addressed as Mr. Sowell. So I'm not happy with that. But I would like to see the Lewiston City Council authorize the police chief O'Malley to set up a special task force when a person calls and a crack dealer or a prostitution is occurring in their apartment building, in their neighborhood, that they respond immediately. However, I know that is not their fault because they have manning problems. Because I've watched over the years the police department be cut by 10 personnel or more. However, I'm hoping that the school department will give us a break on the next fiscal year budget 2020, which you people will be working on shortly, and not hire any teachers, so maybe we can hire more law enforcement. I was informed that they've been given a 2.5% increase in salary, that's the Lewiston Police Department, and a retrofitting for back pay. So, you know, I used to be a deputy sheriff when I first got out of the military for Androscoggin County, under the CEDAR program, and Lionel Cody was the sheriff at the time, and my sergeant was Gagney, Andy Gagney, very nice individual. But I'll tell you, if I was a police officer today, and an individual does not follow through with my instructions, he's in big trouble because I'd shoot him in the knee or cripple him. These police officers are our best. And if the individual who is cracked out, or now that we pass recreational marijuana, I ran into a girl the other day. She was doing marijuana jelly, and she was totally out of her head. And this is what these officers are coming under. Then don't forget the epidemic with needles. Our officers are our cream of the crop, and they will get home safe. And if you do not follow a policeman's instruction, you suffer the consequence. Thank you. Have a good day. And I wish you would, you know, advise the police chief that he can set up a task force to go in. Because the DA says, well, we're following the girls to the dealer, and then we're following it up the chain. Well, while the DEA is doing a 6-month investigation, they've created another 100 prostitutes that were cracked out, or another generation cracked out. We must have rapid response to the drugs going on in Lewiston, or this will be dirty Lou till hell freezes over. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Chuck. Anyone else for public comment? Okay, roll call.
All roll call votes for this meeting will begin with the Councilor of Ward 2. We'll also note for the record that Councilor LaJoy and Councilor Cloutier have an excused absence for this meeting.
Okay, consent agenda.
Consent agenda consists of 5 items this evening. I will point out to the council that we amended the agenda yesterday, so we left updated copies on your table tonight. For the consent agenda, item 1A, appointment of City Council representative to the Auburn-Lewiston Airport Board of Directors. Item 1B, appointment to the Housing Authority Board of Commissioners. Item 1C, appointment to the Lewiston-Auburn Water Pollution Control Authority. Item 2, indefinitely postpone the request to amend the traffic schedule to add 2 stop signs at Mark Street at the intersection with Gina Street. And item 3, amendment to the traffic schedule to add a stop sign at Judith Street at the intersection with Mark Street.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Councilor Lyson, seconded by Councilor Beam. Questions on the consent agenda? Call the roll.
Council from Ward 2?
Yes.
Ward 3?
Yes.
Ward 6?
Yes.
Ward 7?
Yes.
Ward 1?
Yes.
And Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 6-0.
Agenda item number 15.
Item number 15. Item number 15, public hearing and final passage to contractually rezone the property at 230 Bartlett Street from the Highway Business District to the Downtown Residential District. Requested action to approve final passage of the amendment to the zoning and land use code and map to contractually rezone the property at 230 Bartlett Street from the Highway Business District to the Downtown Residential District, subject to a contractual agreement.
So moved.
Second?
Motion by Counselor Lyson, seconded by Counselor Pettengill. Questions from the council? The public? Back to the council. Call the roll.
Counselor from Ward 2?
Yes?
Ward 3?
Yes.
Ward 6?
Yes.
Ward 7?
Yes.
Ward 1?
Yes.
And Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 6-0.
I know you wanted to sit here the whole day, Ron, but. Thank you so much. No problem. Agenda item number 4.
Item number 4, public hearing for approval of an outdoor entertainment permit for a live musical event in Pettengill Park. Requested action to conduct a public hearing on an application for an outdoor entertainment event for Pettengill Park and to grant a permit for an outdoor entertainment event as required by the City Code of Ordinances, Chapter 10, Article 1, Section 10-3, for an outdoor music concert to be held at Pettengill Park on Thursday, September 27th, contingent upon positive recommendations from the Police Department, Fire Department, Code Health Officer, and Land Use Inspector regarding compliance with all regulations and compliance with all city ordinances.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Counselor Lyson, seconded by Counselor Ray. Discussion on the council. Public. Council. Call the roll.
Counselor from Ward 1? I'm sorry, Ward 2?
Yes?
Ward 3?
Yes.
Ward 6?
Yes.
Ward 7?
Yes.
Ward 1?
Yes.
And Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 6-0.
Agenda item number 5.
Item number 5. Public hearing on a new liquor license application for Dave's American Buffet, 40 East Avenue. Requested action to authorize the city clerk's office to approve a new liquor license application for Dave's American Buffet, 40 East Avenue.
So moved.
Second?
Motion by Counselor Marcotte, seconded by Counselor Pettengill. Discussion on the Counselor Marcotte.
Which exact building is this in?
It's, I believe, going to be taking the place of the Super China Super Buffet. It's
Okay.
going to be right next to Sea Asian.
C40.
C40.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I know the place, thank
Next
you.
to the hibachi. Yes, thank you.
Public. Council. Call the roll.
Counselor from Ward 2?
Yes?
Ward 3?
Yes.
Ward 6?
Yes.
Ward 7?
Yes.
Ward 1?
Yes.
And Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 6-0.
Item number 6.
Item number 6, public hearing on a new application for a new liquor license for the Pop Shop Diner, 413 Main Street. Requested action to authorize the city clerk's office to approve a new liquor license application for the Pop Shop Diner, 413 Main Street.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Counselor Ray, seconded by Counselor Beam. Questions from the council.
I got a question.
Counselor Lyson.
So this is a new liquor license, and that requires a public hearing, obviously, as do the renewals as well?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I thought they were, are they going to be serving dinner now? I didn't know if they had served dinner, or if you know that or not.
Their business hours on their application are 7 a.m. to 2 p.m.
Okay. But they want a liquor to be able to be served during that period of time. They're not expanding their hours or doing dinner.
Not to our understanding, but to be honest, Counselor, that wouldn't be part of their application.
Okay.
To take that into consideration.
Other than the hours.
Right.
Thank you.
The public. Back to the council. Call the roll.
Counselor from Ward 2?
Yes?
Ward 3?
Yes.
Ward 6?
Yes.
Ward 7?
Yes.
Ward 1?
Yes.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 6-0.
Agenda item number 7.
Item number 7, public hearing on an application for a new liquor license and special amusement permit for live entertainment for Agora Grand Event Center, 220 Bates Street. Requested action to authorize the city clerk's office to approve a new liquor license application and special amusement permit for Agora Grand Event Center, 220 Bates Street.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Counselor Ray, seconded by Counselor Lyson. Questions from the council. Public. Back to the council. Call the roll.
Counselor from Ward 2?
Yes?
Ward 3?
Yes.
Ward 4? I'm sorry, Ward 6?
Yes.
Ward 7?
Yes.
Ward 1?
Yes.
And Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 6-0.
Number 8.
Item number 8, public hearing on the renewal application for a special amusement permit for live entertainment for Fast Breaks, 1465 Lisbon Street. Requested action to grant a special amusement permit for live entertainment to Fast Breaks, 1465 Lisbon Street.
So moved.
Second?
Motion by Counselor Marcotte, seconded by Counselor Pettengill. Questions from the council, public, council. Call the roll.
Counselor from Ward 2?
Yes.
Ward 3?
Yes.
Ward 6?
Yes.
Ward 7?
Yes.
Ward 1?
Yes.
And Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 6-0.
9.
Item number 9, public hearing on the renewal application for a special amusement permit for live entertainment for Baxter Brew Pub, 130 Main Street. Requested action to grant a special amusement permit for live entertainment to Baxter Brew Pub, 130 Main Street.
It should be Mill Street, right?
I'm sorry, thank you, Counselor, Mill Street.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Counselor Lyson, seconded by Counselor Pettingill. Questions from the council, the public, back to the council. Call the roll.
Counselor from Ward 2?
Yes.
Ward 3?
Yes.
Ward 6?
Yes.
Ward 7?
Yes.
Ward 1?
Yes.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 6-0.
Agenda item number 10.
Item number 10, public hearing on an application from Dana's Garage, 193 Crowley Road for an automobile graveyard junkyard permit. Requested action to grant an automobile graveyard junkyard permit to Dana's Garage, 193 Crowley Road, subject to the condition that no more than 1,000 tires may be stored on the property.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Counselor Ray, seconded by Counselor Beam. Questions from the council, the public, to the council. Call the roll.
Counselor from Ward 2?
Yes.
Ward 3?
Yes.
Ward 6?
Yes.
Ward 7?
Yes.
Ward 1?
Yes.
And Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 6-0.
Agenda item number 11.
Item number 11, public hearing on an application from Main Heavy Equipment, 1445 Sabata Street, for an automobile graveyard junkyard permit. Requested action to grant an automobile graveyard junkyard permit to Main Heavy Equipment, 1445 Sabata Street.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Counselor Ray, seconded by Counselor Beam. Council, public, council. Call the roll.
Counselor from Ward 2?
Yes.
Ward 3?
Yes.
Word 6?
Yes.
Word 7?
Yes.
Word 1?
Yes.
And Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 6-0.
12.
Item number 12, public hearing on an application from Grimmel's Industries, 50 River Road, for an automobile graveyard junkyard permit. Requested action to grant an automobile graveyard junkyard permit to Grimmel's Industries, 50 River Road, subject to the following conditions. 1, the hours of operation shall be limited to 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Saturday, and 2, maintain screening from the main turnpike.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Counselor Beam, seconded by Counselor Ray. Council. Ray.
Sorry, I was a little unclear on the second condition, maintain screening from the main turnpike. Who is maintaining?
Right, the automobile graveyard junkyard needs to maintain screening, so they either have fencing and/or trees or shrubs or bushes to maintain, sort of a barrier.
Right.
For noise and visual.
Sorry, I feel like I was misunderstanding who assesses that. Does code or?
The Code Department.
Thank you.
Yes.
That's what.
Public. Council. Call the roll.
Counselor from Ward 2?
Yes.
Ward 3?
Yes.
Word 6?
Yes.
Word 7?
Yes.
Word 1?
Yes.
And Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 6-0.
Number 13.
Item number 13, public hearing on an application from the Lewiston Public Works Department, 424 through 482 River Road, for an automobile graveyard junkyard permit. Requested action to grant an automobile graveyard junkyard permit to the Lewiston Public Works Department, 424 through 482 River Road.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Counselor Lyson, seconded by Counselor Ray. Questions from the council? Public? Council? Call the roll.
Counselor from Ward 2?
Yes.
Ward 3?
Yes.
Word 6?
Yes.
Word 7?
Yes.
Word 1?
Yes.
And Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 6-0.
Agenda item number 14.
Item number 14, public hearing on an application from Re-Energy Lewiston LLC, 38 Alfred A. Plord Parkway, for an automobile graveyard junkyard permit. Requested action to grant an automobile graveyard junkyard permit to Re-Energy Lewiston LLC, 38 Alfred A. Plord Parkway, subject to the attached conditions.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Counselor Beam, seconded by Counselor Pettingill. Questions from the council? Public? Back to the council. Call the roll.
Counselor from Ward 2?
Yes.
Ward 3?
Yes.
Ward 6?
Yes.
Ward 7?
Yes.
Ward 1?
Yes.
And Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 6 to 0.
Agenda item number 16.
Item number 16, condemnation hearing for the building located at 1314 Sabata Street. There are 2 items for requested hearing. The first item, to conduct a hearing to determine if the building located at 1314 Sabata Street has met the dangerous building statutes as defined in Title 17, Section 2851 et al.
Do we need a motion to start this? Okay. I just need my... That's statutes. Oh, yeah. So, we are meeting this evening, conduct a hearing to determine whether the structure at 1314 Sabata Street is a nuisance or dangerous building within the meaning of applicable Maine statute found in 17 MRS 2851 and succeeding statutes. Before we start, I first have a question for all City Council members. 1314 Sabata Street is owned by James E. Tapley. Does any City Council member know the property owner, have knowledge about this matter that means you could not fairly and impartially hear the facts and decide based on the evidence presented at this hearing? Okay. So the mortgage holder has entered an appearance for this hearing and indicated its intent to rehabilitate the structure to bring it up to code. In light of the Planning and Code Enforcement Department, has indicated it does not need to come this evening. So next, I will ask any representative or representatives for 1314 Sabata Street or a party in interest who is present tonight might introduce yourself, including identifying your name, address, and position.
Mr. Mayor, I just thank you, to reiterate what you read there, staff has been in contact with the attorney for this property here, and he has asked for an extension of time. They've given us a proposal to fix the building, and while we're encouraged that they want to fix the building, we think the estimate's too low at this point, so they're willing to revisit that and come back with another number. So with that, we would suggest a continuation of this hearing.
I will entertain a motion to continue.
So moved.
Second.
Motion to continue this hearing by Councilor Lyson and seconded by Councilor Beam. And no objections from Code. City Attorney? Questions from the council? Call the roll. Oh, Councilor Marcotte, of course.
We're going to be in the same predicament that we were with the one on or near King Street,
Oh, Fair Street?
Fair Street.
We'll find out. I mean, if they can come back with a reasonable number, demonstrate professional and technical capacity to save the building, then we're more than willing to entertain that. But at this time, they haven't given us sufficient evidence.
Because one of the questions I was going to ask, once we got into it, was why is it taking this long to come to us after seeing what's in the packet?
Agreed. I mean, this came to our attention recently, actually.
I mean, I've never seen anything this bad.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. And we're surprised that they want to save it, but if they want to try, we'll give them the benefit of the doubt.
Okay.
Councilor Ray?
Is the building currently secured?
I believe it is, right?
Last I knew, no.
No?
Sorry?
Last I knew, no.
No.
And there's a 10 by 10 hole in the floor.
Correct.
Seems unsafe to continue
It's
the
an attractive nuisance, correct?
Easily fixed.
And staff is recommending that we continue.
Yeah, I mean, we've ordered them to secure the building. They have been on the property within the last 2 weeks. But I'm not, when were we last out there, Nick? So it's been nearly a month since we've seen if it's been checked to see if it's been secured.
So it could be secured.
It very well may be.
Okay. Councilor Pettengill?
I happened to drive by it this weekend. I was curious where it was. Unlike the last site that we saw, this sits back off the road. It's very difficult to see. I'm alarmed at the state that it's in. I can't see kicking this down the road, especially the way the last one went. And if there's already hesitations about the feasibility of them rehabbing this, I can't see kicking this down the road.
Who made the motion, Kathy? I didn't write it
Motion is by Councilor Lyson, seconded by Councilor Beam. But that was the motion to continue.
That is the motion to continue, so, any more discussion on the motion to continue? Call the roll.
Counselor from Ward 2?
No.
Ward 3?
No.
Ward 6?
No?
Ward 7?
No.
Ward 1?
Yes.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Motion failed. The vote was 2 to 4. So
Okay. So we continue. All right. All right. Fill in the blanks. Okay. I'll start on the Okay. If we determine that the property or structure is a nuisance or dangerous building, we will then determine what actions the property owner must take. Under 17 MRS 2151, a structure or any part thereof is a nuisance or dangerous building if it is structurally unsafe, unstable, unsanitary, constitutes a fire hazard, is unsuitable or improper for the use or occupancy to which it is put, constitutes a hazard to health or safety because of inadequate maintenance, dilapidation, obsolescence, or abandonment, or is otherwise dangerous to life or property. This is the standard that we will use to decide whether the structure is a nuisance or dangerous building. Now the procedures the City Council will follow in conducting this hearing are as follows. Any documents to be used in this proceeding will be marked as an Exhibit I. To accept into evidence, the Planning and Code Enforcement Department's Exhibits A through G. Number 2, the presentation of evidence for the property will occur in the following order. City Planning and Code Enforcement Department will present an opening statement and relevant evidence regarding why they believe the structure at 1314 Sabata Street is a nuisance or dangerous building and what remedies the council shall order. Following the completion of the Planning and Code Enforcement Department's presentation, any opposing party will have an opportunity to present an opening statement and any relevant evidence it wants to the City Council to consider with regard to whether the structure at issue is a nuisance or dangerous building. If so, what remedy the council shall order. C, the Planning and Code Enforcement Department can then ask questions of any opposing party and any witnesses they present. D, any opposing party can then ask questions of the Planning and Code Enforcement Department and any witnesses. E, the Planning and Code Enforcement Department can then make additional comments regarding the opposing party's presentation. Any opposing party can then make additional comments regarding the presentation of the Planning and Code Enforcement Department. City Council members can then ask questions of the Planning and Code Enforcement Department, an opposing party, or a witness. Each side can then make closing remarks of not more than 2 minutes each, and only parties to these hearings will be allowed to participate. Comments from the public will not be taken at this time. No worries there. After all information has been presented, the record will be closed and the City Council will deliberate and take a vote on whether the structure in question is a nuisance or dangerous building. If the Council determines that the structure is a nuisance or dangerous building, it shall deliberate and take a vote on the appropriate order to be made to remedy the situation. This is an administrative hearing and not a court proceeding or trial. Therefore, the formal rules of evidence will not apply. As mayor, I will determine the appropriateness and admissibility of evidence on the advice of the city attorney. I'll now ask the Lewiston Planning and Code Enforcement Department to present the City Council with information relevant to the matter before it.
Thank you, Mayor. 1314 Sabata Street is a vacant single-family dwelling owned by James E. Tapley by virtue of a warranty deed dated August 2nd, 2002. The deed to James Tapley is in your packets as Exhibit A. The following entities have mortgages on the property: the Bank of New York Mellon, formerly known as the Bank of New York, as a trustee for certificate holders of CWALT Incorporated, Bank of New York Mellon, and Mortgage Electronic Registration Systems Incorporated as nominee for Countrywide Bank. On August 29th, 2018, a notice of this hearing was recorded in the Androscoggin Registry, County of Deeds, Book 9920, page 5, a copy of which is included in your packets as Exhibit B. On September 12th, 2018, James Tapley was served with a notice of hearing, and that return of services in your packets as Exhibit C. On September 6, 2018, Bank of New York Mellon was served with a notice of the hearing, and that return of services in your packets as Exhibit D. The Bank of New York Mellon has entered an appearance for this hearing as evidenced in the emails in your packets, Exhibit D.1. On August 30th, 2018, MERS was served with a notice of hearing, and that return of services in your packets as Exhibit E.
Good evening, Council. My name is Thomas Maynard. I'm the City of Lewiston's Building Inspector, Plumbing Inspector, and Code Enforcement Officer. A copy of my qualifications in your packets as Exhibit G. Correspondence to the owner, tenants, and the bank. In 2009, the water service was disconnected for failure to pay, indicating the building was abandoned before that date. On March 7, 2018, Code Enforcement Officer Nick Richards, who's here this evening, received a call from Dirigo Property Services, a property preservation company, regarding the condition of this property that is severely deteriorated, left unsecured. Subsequently, Nick issued a condemnation order to the owner of record, the parties of interest in this proceeding, Dirigo Property Services, LLC, so Scott St. Lair, Bayview Loan Servicing, LLC, care of Corporation Services and Company, and Bayview Loan Servicing, ordering the building to be secured, then renovated and repaired, or to be demolished by no later than June 20th, 2018. The owner of the structure was notified and the building was posted. Present conditions at 1314 Sabatis Street. Exterior, tarp covering the roof materials. Appearance of blight. Creates a dangerous condition due to the threat of collapse. Deteriorated roof allows the entry of the elements, causing interior damage, deterioration resulting in subsequent molding, mildewing, and rotting of structural elements, creating unsanitary and hazardous conditions. Public utilities disconnected. The electric meter obviously was pulled. Uninhabitable as no working electrical system, resulting in hazardous conditions due to the lack of smoke detectors and required lighting, nor any other type of services for utilities such as cooking or anything else. Per Water and Sewer Department, water meter was pulled in 2009, making the house uninhabitable, as plumbing system is not connected to a water supply for the maintenance of sanitary conditions. The unsecured door is not properly latched and locked shut. Structure is not secure. Presents a public health and safety hazard. Potential for squatters to enter and take up residence. The exterior of the property, trash and construction demolition debris stored outside. Rain gutter downspout is falling off of the structure. Blightful conditions, nuisance due to unsanitary conditions. The roof, accumulated pine needles, some vegetation in the gutters indicative of inadequate maintenance. The rear window, it has a deteriorated sash with no protective treatment. The interior living space. Severe water damage for the roof leak causing structural damage and unsanitary conditions. Collapse of the floor due to structural deterioration of the joists from water infiltration from the leaking roof, making for dangerous conditions. Severe health and safety hazard to anyone attempting to enter the structure, as to dangerous and unsanitary conditions as well. Compromised structural stability as noted by the bowing floor. Unsecured door clearly visible as daylight seen through the jamb. Dangerous to life and property due to inadequate maintenance, dilapidation, and abandonment. Unsuitable for the use to which it is intended. Through the basement bulkhead, standing water roughly 2 feet deep. Water staining shows water has been infiltrating the structure for quite some time, up to 4 to 5 feet in depth, making for dangerous and unsanitary conditions. Demolition debris from the collapsed floor makes for dangerous conditions. Foam insulation, car tires, chemical containers contribute to the hazardous conditions and also unsanitary. Exterior window is deteriorated sill due to water infiltration, allowing for the entry of the elements. Further evidence of inadequate maintenance, dilapidation, and abandonment. The kitchen dining room area shows evidence of severe water damage. Impacts the electrical system, ceilings, walls, cabinets, floor structure, creating hazardous unsanitary conditions. Evidence of mold on the cabinets, as you can see in the white staining. Presents a public health and safety hazard. There's rust on the baseboard. Dangerous to life and property due to structural instability, inadequate maintenance, dilapidation, and abandonment. Unsuitable for the use it is intended. Kitchen areas, also some more pictures we're showing across the board here. You can see the removal of the drywall. Apparently this was possibly going through rehab before, and they abandoned it. You also can see here the collapsed floor, roughly 10 by 10 foot square hole from severe water damage. Collapsed floor due to water damage also. Floor joist structurally compromised, and as you can see there, the rot so affected the joist that under a simple dead load, with nobody walking on them, we're not even certain of that. Maybe somebody was walking on it when this collapsed, and they got out without injury. But the floor went clear through to the basement, shearing off those 2x10s, appear to be 2x10s, across that front wall there. You can see it here again, how the deterioration occurred and how the floor was collapsed. These are also the stickers that are installed by the preservation company. Multiple notices of winterization, vacancy posting notice from 2012, door not latched, presenting a public health and safety hazard. The door is also unsecured. Unstable flooring in the immediate area creating dangerous conditions just as you walk through the door. This shows the living room again, another collapsed floor, the ceiling, more deteriorated drywall and flooring. You can see broken glass in the back creating hazardous conditions. The gutters are obstructed with vegetation. Water cannot properly drain, adding to the infiltration of water into the structure, also creating blighted conditions. Here's another look through the window. You can see the floor collapse, the bowing of the floor. If this were to continue, the rest of the floor systems would collapse into the basement. Conclusions. The structure is abandoned and unsecured, creating safety hazards as it attracts transients looking to squat. The roof structure is in severe disrepair, allowing environmental elements into the structure, causing deterioration to all structural components, making the building unstable with the threat of imminent collapse. The floor joists have failed, resulting in a catastrophic collapse into the basement, creating a large hole in the living space, and it's an immediate health and safety hazard to anyone entering the structure. The structural collapse of the portion of the floor shifted the loading to the remaining floor structure, creating a highly unstable condition, compounding the immediate health and safety hazard and threat of collapse. The infiltration of rainwater has caused mold, mildew, and other environmental organisms to grow throughout the structure, causing further deterioration of the structural elements and increasing health and safety hazard to expose these organisms, creating unsanitary conditions. How you get rot is mold. Mold eats dead cellular material. It's a fungus, and that's what's destroying the structural elements of this building, and it's accelerating. The accumulation of water in the basement creates a moist environment throughout the structure, further the growth of environmental organisms. The condition presented by the removal of the interior wall and ceiling covering, leaving exposed combustible materials, greatly increasing the threat of the accelerated spread of fire. The structure is unstable for the use it is put. The excessive debris about the property creates hazardous conditions. The structure constitutes a hazard to health and safety because of the inadequate maintenance, dilapidation, obsolescence, and abandonment. As such, we ask that you adopt our proposed findings of fact and conclusion of law and order that the structure be demolished. Thank you.
Okay. There's no one here from the opposing side. Anyone from council have questions of planning and code enforcement?
I do. Who presented us with a theoretical option to repair in the building? Is that the current owner or a representative, or who did we hear from?
Attorney representing the bank.
Okay. I agree with, some of the other counselors. This is, do we want to kick this down the road or not? But I think we usually kind of bend over backwards if someone's at least put a proposal in, that we give them the opportunity to do that. Is this a different situation, or is this?
No, I mean, we agree with the counselors that this building is in dire straits and is one of the worst that we've dealt with from a single-family perspective. At the same time, historically, we've given people the benefit of the doubt. If they're willing to put whatever resources are adequate to save a building, we're not interested in tearing down a building if we don't have to. If somebody wants to save this building, more power to them.
We have gotten orders for demolition in the past where we've worked with the bank or owners to rehabilitate a property. If we get the order, we have the option. If they come to us with a plan, and an order would also help to expedite the execution of that plan.
Right. That might have been helpful up front to hear. I might have voted differently, to know that we still had an option. I just didn't want to kind of.
We
I mean,
haven't.
this one is maybe beyond, and my other question is like, why have they waited so long to do anything? I mean,
As the council knows, I mean, a lot of these, no one responds until we go through this process, unfortunately.
Many of the banks are getting insurance payouts for these mortgages. They're getting their missed interest paid, part of the loan, the mortgage insurance programs. Also, the FDIC does this. And that's why you see these not moving very quickly at all.
thanks.
Councilor Ray.
So thank you for all of this information. I think my biggest concern is that this building is not secured and it's coming, winter's coming, for lack of a better term. And, you know, folks, the shelters are pretty full and folks are gonna be looking for a roof over their heads. And if someone finds their way into this building, which it seems broken window and unsecured door, it's pretty easy to do so. I think that's my kind of impetus for moving towards the option of demolition with you folks. Thank you for all of this information. It's very thorough. Sorry you had to
For
go
what
into
it's
that.
worth, when we do have a vacant building like that, there are times where if no one's being responsive, we'll go out there and secure it. It's not uncommon for Nick or some of the other staff to actually go out there, and if there's something there that we can secure it with, we'll take those measures.
So, and to be fair, we have not been there for a month, so we can't say for sure that it is not secured.
I believe that's the case, right? We haven't, you know.
No, I checked and I was there August 21st the last time. They've been in contact with us since asking what is required to secure the building at this point.
It's been about 3 weeks since you physically laid eyes on it. Okay.
And assured us that they were going to secure it.
Okay, and I'll just note for the council that on the order number 23 does state that the owner or its successors shall immediately secure the building from entry. That is part of the order. And I also have an amendment to the order that the city attorney wrote. Should have been a doctor.
I'm a doctor of law.
But I think I can. I think I can read it if you know when the time's right to entertain a motion. Does anyone else have any questions of code enforcement? Okay, then I will make the motion to adopt the order that is in front of us with the amendment to Section 25 that states, I think, unless the owner or mortgage holder provides a plan to the Director of Planning and Code Enforcement to rehabilitate the building and implement such plan within a reasonable time as determined by the Director, in which case the required demolition shall not occur provided the mortgage holder substantially completes the planned rehabilitation within the proposed time. If substantial completion does not so occur, then the building shall be demolished within 30 days of such determination by the Director. I'll make that motion.
I'll second that.
Motion made by me and seconded by Councilor Lyson. And now we are in discussion on the motion with as amended, which I'll hand to Kathy so she can make her way through it.
Can you explain the motion?
The motion is the motion in simply is to order demolition of the structure unless they turn a proposal into Dave expeditiously that he approves and actually starts to execute it. I think that actually starts to execute the plan.
Yeah.
That's it in a nutshell.
Otherwise, we do.
Otherwise, we knock her down.
And do we give a time limit?
As to the discretion of Director Hediger.
Yeah, I mean, we've been in communication with their attorney as it is. I mean, they know that we want them to act, so pending the action that you folks take tonight, we'll be in communication with them tomorrow, saying realistically how much time do you need. At the same rate, we were willing to continue this originally to the 16th, so I would suggest we stay with that. You know, my gut right now is to stay with that deadline in order to get these folks to actually make a decision. It's been since 2009 that this building's been vacant.
Time to move. Any other comments on the motion? Call the roll.
Counselor from Ward 2?
Yes.
Ward 3?
Yes.
Ward 6?
Yes.
Ward 7?
Yes.
Ward 1?
Yes.
And Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 6 to 0.
Okay.
I'd like to add something, if I may. I was looking for an opportunity to do this. My duties have changed with the city. I'm doing new construction, issuing the permits and inspections, and amongst other things. I want you to know that it was Code Enforcement Officer Nick Richards, who did the bulk of this work preparing this presentation. He did the investigative work as well on it. And I only added just a little bit of assistance to it. This presentation has actually been his, but as I, being the building official, had to do the presentation with it. And I've been out there on 2 occasions, but he's done the bulk of the heavy lifting here. Just want to make sure that you recognize that.
Thank you, Nick. And thank you, Tom. Thanks, Marty. And item number 17.
Item number 17,
Heather's
resolve.
favorite playground.
Resolve authorizing a budget transfer from the 2018 bond issue premium to the Marcotte Park Playground.
So moved.
Second?
Motion by Counselor Marcotte, seconded by Counselor Pettengills. And someone's going to ask, Ed or Heather, could we get a
Well, I think
brief
everybody's
1-2?
aware that the contractor has been on scene. They've started to do some work. And in spite of the topography there, they found that the subsurface area under the turf was very soft and muddy, and therefore they need to excavate and bring in gravel to provide an adequate base for the remainder of the work.
Okay. Questions from the council? Call the roll.
All set?
All right. There's no public sitting here, so.
Counselor from Ward 2.
Yes.
Ward 3.
Yes.
Ward 6.
Yes?
Ward 7.
Yes.
Ward 1.
Yes.
And Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 6-0.
Okay, reports and updates, and I do understand we have a brief update from Counselor Ray.
Brief. So on the 24th, next Monday, the school committee will be meeting. We will be in executive session for much of the first portion of the meeting to discuss the superintendent search. And then the second part that I think counselors might find interesting is the meeting will include a presentation and discussion on the budget process from our Chief Administrative Officer, Bobby Avery, in preparation for our 9/25 joint meeting with the City Council.
Any other reports, updates, other business? Counselor Marcotte?
Just an inquiry, political signs on city property. No?
If they are off of the right-of-way on our property per se, that's correct. It's a no-no.
Okay, maybe somebody should look at these signs that are in front of the high school. The first entrance when you're traveling from Pleasant to Webster.
And as I understand, they're also not allowed in any park spaces in one.
Correct. They are not allowed on any city property. They can be on the right-of-way adjacent to city property, but not on the city property.
I think signs that were removed in prior elections on the kind of, is it a triangular piece at College and Fair and Montello, there are a number of signs in that location.
Those always get picked up.
Yeah, sooner than later, though, there, so.
While we're talking about signs, do we not have an ordinance that prohibits non-political signs from being placed in the city?
I don't believe, if we do, it's unconstitutional.
Okay.
We do have some language, and I don't know if Mr. Hediger is still here, regarding temporary signs, regarding civic events, the Greek festival and so forth. There is some language in the code regarding the ability to put signs up.
There are
for
some
that.
certain signs that are littering our roads that are not regarding anything on the ballot this year. So I'd love to see all those get picked up. They happen to say no CMP project.
We would run into some difficulties with the courts.
Mr. Mayor.
Outstanding. Council Mark.
Some time ago, a few years back, I inquired that someone was pitching a business on a sign at Ricker Park, and the then director said that wasn't appropriate and had it removed. We'll probably call the individual.
I think we can still remove business, commercial signs.
Commercial sign, yeah.
All right, so I do have an update or other business. The Public Works Oversight Committee will be starting again in mid-October. On October 2nd, we're going to have a brief workshop where we're polling the council to see if there are any issues that are near and dear to you that you would like the Public Works Oversight Committee to look at. Sounds like Councilor Ray's got something. She's smiling. All right. So, good. I do have a few items that we're already going to have on the list, such as exploring the rec department and why that's in Public Works and the possibility of yanking it out, as well as moving the pool from rec department to the general fund. We will take a look at the plowing routes, winter ops in general, downtown snow removal. We'll have an update after 2 years of how that program's been working. We will be reviewing the sidewalk plowing policy and routes. We'll get an update on the automation of the scale at the landfill, look at their LCIP requests, their budget requests. Would like to talk about adding weight to the free dump pass we gave residents and what the utilization of those passes are. We started on that last year, didn't finish. Like to move forward with our pilot program on inner-city recycling. And we're going to have some discussions on our multifamily trash pickup program. Also, we have talked about utilizing the Public Works Oversight Committee in the hiring process for Dave Jones' replacement. So far, that's what's on the list. I can email you all a bunch of that before October 2nd, since I know you wrote it all down.
What's your deadline on this to accomplish all that?
We got a couple months. Thanks. All right. So with that, Councilor Lyson, you're up.
Sure. I'd love to enter into executive session regarding consultation with the city attorney.
Seconded by Councilor Ray. All in favor? Unanimous. Let's